So right now, let me turn to keep us on time to Dr. Clive Green, who is the Executive Director of Biopharmaceuticals Research and Development at AstraZeneca, where he leads research chemical synthesis using automated technologies and the global processing and distribution of research molecules, and is here to tell us today about some of the policies that AstraZeneca has in place around these issues. So thank you very much, Dr. Green.
Thanks, Aaron. So, hold on, I can't see this properly. Okay. Yeah. So, so thanks to Aaron and to Lonnie as well for the opportunity to participate in today's session, and also to join the panel discussion later on. So, first, just to say, I'm fully employed by AstraZeneca. I'll be sharing the perspective on AstraZeneca policy and process here, and I have no other relationships to disclose. So, as we start, maybe just a brief word on AstraZeneca and to help position AstraZeneca as a company within the private industry representation at this workshop. We are a global pharmaceutical company. We create novel therapies that help people with cancer, chronic diseases, and rare diseases. These are areas we believe we can make the most meaningful difference to patients. As I say, we do that as a global organization. So we have more than 150 projects in the clinical development area. We have more than 80,000 employees around the world. And we have R&D and manufacturing facilities in 16 countries across the globe. So, so maybe to just to get the language aligned with how we view this internally, and all companies will do this slightly differently. For research integrity, we're primarily focused on that through bioethics. And by bioethics here, we mean the practical application of ethics to the issues that arise from our study and practice of biological and medical science. And for us, in terms of inside the company, I think that this speaks to our internal corporate structure that Lisa touched on as well in terms of the importance of structures. Bioethics is a component of ethics and transparency in AstraZeneca, where the focus is on building trust by demonstrating integrity. So here is the connection to research integrity, and also transparency and fair treatment in everything that we do. Ethics and transparency itself is one of 3 pillars that we have that sits under sustainability. From that perspective, it sits alongside the access that we provide to healthcare and also environmental protection. This is important from a transparency perspective in terms of how we report on sustainability and ethics, and I'll touch on that later. So coming to the policy side, so bioethics in practice is governed in AstraZeneca under our global bioethics policy. Perhaps one point I should also make here, of course, is that we, as a pharmaceutical company, we are funders of research, and we conduct our own scientific research. So from that perspective, integrity is absolutely paramount. And it also means that the scope of our research spans not just clinical, that we're sort of focused on here, but also preclinical activities and all the way through to drug discovery activities. So as a consequence of that, when we think about research integrity and align that with bioethics, it's a very broad scope, as is shown here with the areas that we cover within our policy. So what I did want to do, though, was spend just a little bit of time focusing on clinical research integrity, since that is a sort of focus of this workshop, and highlighting some of the key principles and responsibilities that underpin the bioethics policy with regards to clinical research. And these will be familiar to most, but just to work through at a portfolio level, we maintain our portfolio of projects that's designed to deliver medicines that are effective, safe, differentiated, and address unmet patient need. And from that perspective, is underpinned by the company values of following science, following the science, putting patients first, and doing the right thing. We conduct clinical studies in accordance with all regulatory requirements. This is the way we address all of our bioethics and all of our work. And so we apply the recognized international quality and safety standards. To the point on data, on open data, I think it's a really valid point that Lisa makes. So we make information publicly available about registration and results. We also make information available about protocols. There's trial synopses, and there's statistical analysis plans. From the perspective of the trust component, it's really important for us, primarily important for us, that participants and patients can trust us. So we give those who participate in our clinical studies full, truthful, and understandable information. And of course, we gain their consent to be part of the study. But from the perspective of, again, the broad reach that we have, because we're conducting our own research, we conduct preclinical studies as well, of course, to ensure that all safety aspects are being evaluated. And this assessment of potential risk and benefit, which justifies the testing of a candidate drug in the clinical setting, that assessment of risk and benefit has gone on right from our earliest work on a project in drug discovery. And they, on average, have gone 3 to 5 years of assessing that risk benefit before we even get to the clinic, and making lots of decisions along the way over what isn't going to get into the clinic, as well, of course, as what is. So transparency, I think, is absolutely crucial here. And so we share our approach to bioethics through our external website. We share our bioethics content through our company sustainability report. So this is where, as I mentioned earlier on, we have this connection to publishing our report, which includes bioethics components to it. So that's externally published. As a result of that publication, we participate in annual external audits to ensure that that information is accurate. I guess we're repeating here the component, but it's really important that we register our clinical and observational studies. We post our study results on disclosure websites. And to the point on publishing peer-reviewed journals, we make a good faith effort to publish our results in peer-reviewed journals, all in a timely way to demonstrate transparency. And the publication of our science is a key part of AstraZeneca's approach to pushing the boundaries of science. We should be doing innovative science, and we should be publishing in that peer-reviewed journals. And there's a strong drive to do that. And then the number one component of our bioethics policy is to act in accordance with applicable legislation, regulations, and guidelines. So to enforce the strong policy that exists across all our sites. So just to talk you through a little bit, as Patricia did, having one part of the policy is fine, and that's one step. The key component is, how do we ensure compliance with our policy? So in AstraZeneca, our bioethics responsibilities underpin our overarching science policy. And that is one of the 4 pillars of our own code of ethics, which defines our values and behavior at work. This is really important for us in AstraZeneca because all employees participate in mandatory annual training on our code of ethics. So every year we are undergoing training on that component of research integrity that sits within the bioethics side. For employees who participate in, as a result of their job, in any other specific area, and maybe as an example, we use something like human biological samples use, again, those relevant governance policies and procedures are subjected to annual mandatory training. For any concerns that exist about behavior or activities in relation to research integrity, there are reporting mechanisms. Now, they include a range of axes that people have through their manager, human resources or legal or indeed compliance. In addition, there is an independent third-party group which acts on behalf of AstraZeneca. And then for those allegations, they are investigated by an internal compliance group. And that sits independent of the research functions in order to give it that impartiality that is very similar to what Patricia described for the NIH. So we recognize that that is about instilling policy and process, but in pushing the boundaries of science, not everything that we do or we will want to do in the future is going to be captured within those policy areas. And so to support that continual strive for innovation, we also have two other groups. One is our Bioethics Advisory Group. So this is the group that I chair and is sponsored by the Chief Medical Officer of the company. And we exist to advise the company on the implementation of the global bioethics standard. So it comprises subject experts from all of the areas that were listed, all of the actual topic areas that are captured within the policy. And it's also supported by business function leaders from legal, compliance, corporate affairs, for example. So this group exists to provide advice, support and guidance to scientists, project teams and leaders on bioethical issues. In addition, we maintain the global bioethics standard and the subject-specific standards that sit underneath. And another critical component is horizon scanning to see where scientific, technical and societal developments will prompt ethical challenges in the future so that we can advise on policies such that they are prepared for any future changes. Now, one important point to note here is that the subject experts are scientific experts, and that's a strength of the Bioethics Advisory Group, that it brings together subject experts with broad experience from across the business. But we recognize that they're not trained practicing ethicists. And so that is a very important additional aspect that we have, which is an external advisory committee. This comprises leaders from academic and non-profit institutions, and it provides us this access to expertise in pharmaceutical research and public health ethics and law. The committee serves as a sounding board for proposals. It gives advice and recommendations on ethical issues and societal perspectives. It functions in an advisory capacity, and the advice is internalized to AstraZeneca governance and policy groups for decisions. So I thought to finish, what I should do is just give you a visualization of that framework in terms of how things work. So on the left-hand side here in purple, we have the procedural and governance aspects of the company, which are run through governance teams. This whole space is subject to the corporate values of following the science, putting patients first and doing the right thing. But where there is the need for additional advisory input to the governance teams, that's where we have our Bioethics Advisory Group, whether it's internal knowledge and access to external ethical advisory committees. The bioethics, the advisory groups sit outside of the governance structure to retain their impartiality, which was another component that Patricia mentioned. And so they're advising in to governance teams who will then go on to change the policies. So conscious of may have gone through that a little bit quick, but that's, Aaron, that's everything that I got, and I'm very happy to take questions. I look forward to joining the panel later.
Thanks so much, Clive. I appreciate hearing all about that. I was wondering, actually, this is a question from some of the audience. Do you post the membership on those committees and make available who's on them for public viewing or application or anything like that?
That's a good question. I will have to go back and check if we do or when we would ever have done that. I do believe in the external advisory committee that we do, but I will check and get back to you. Yeah.
Great.
It's a good question. Yeah.
Okay. And then, do you, I mean, how much do these committees and the oversight, like how much do they get involved with the details of the trials themselves and, provide feedback on the, decision to, choose a particular comparator or to, like the sort of the scientific details?
Yeah, so they won't get involved in that scientific detail unless there's a conflict with the policy. So unless there has to be an ethical question to answer or a research integrity question to answer from that perspective, all of we would, so as an example, statistical analysis, I know Lisa talked about that earlier on, quantitative biology, all of that work sits within the project as it's developing and making those decisions. The review of those decisions is done through the governance process, processes, not through that external advisory component or any part of that advisory component. So, an example might be an executive safety board that would review the safety profile, for example. That is within the governance structure, not within the advisory structure.